Welcome to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Today's guest is a first, as far as implementers go, from Northwest Arkansas, Calvin Smith. Calvin is a dedicated father. He's got plenty of experience with podcasting and in the franchise space, EOS Implementer, and all around pretty cool cat. Calvin, thanks for joining. I guess as the Marines would say, hoorah.
Hoorah, yeah. What's up, Russ? Thanks for having me, man. Excited to be here and appreciate you taking the time to let me share my sit and a half here. Looking forward to talking.
I am too. My first question traditionally is wrapped on it. So when you were growing up and you were like 8 years old, what did you always want to be when you grew up?
Yeah.
However, I don't necessarily, I think if you were a Marine, you probably have had that desire before maybe you got shipped off to boot camp or something.
Yeah. Great question, Russ. Yeah. So as a Arkansas hillbilly, there's not a lot of career paths, but my family's huge into the military. I think I'm one of just a couple guys my generation or older that didn't retire from the military. So father, grandfather, everyone served, uncles, cousins, all that. Yeah, always knew I wanted to do the military route. Loved everything about the Marine Corps. Fortunately, or unfortunately, had kids really young. Got married and had kids young at 18, right? And so just was very fortunate throughout my short military career. But I had a mentor of mine tell me, "Hey, if you stay in, you're going to have a lot of really cool stories and no one to tell them to." And so like
Mm.
that really stuck with me. And so like that was the time I was like, "Hey, I need to go do something else and spend some time with the family," right? And was very very thankful I got that advice. But yeah, so easy way to answer the question. Yeah, I thought the military was going to be my career until family
Till kids
decided
enter
that.
the picture.
Yeah, yeah,
Family dynamic changes things. That's
yeah,
really cool. One thing that I wanted to ask is I have a brother-in-law who's currently a Navy SEAL, and he says that other people on his team, like minority of them, are also dads with kids and stuff like that. Actually, a lot of the other Marines that I know, like they either don't have kids for whatever reason, or you know, or at least not yet. But what was it like being 18 with kids in the? I mean, I'm assuming that was shortly after your MOS and boot camp, right? Like that was the beginning of your Marine
yeah,
career.
yeah. So actually my son was born before I left for basic training. My youngest son, I'm since remarried and we have a blended family now. But I was so fortunate, Ross. Very really good family support. So my through dynamics, my son ended up living with my father for a good chunk of my early enlistment. Was very thankful he did a good job of allowing me to kind of pursue my career while taking care of my son. And then, yeah, as I got older, particularly, I think the last sort of deployment I was supposed to go on was with the reserve unit in 2009. And by that time, I'd remarried, we had 3 kids in the house, and it just, it was going to be very, very difficult to like step away from that at that, their age. And so, again, was very fortunate. Had some great conversations with people in the Marine Corps, and they're like, "Hey, like families first. Like if you feel like you're not doing the best thing for them while you're here, then you need to go be there, right?" And like, um, you know, military Marine Corps is filled with great people and great men, and everyone wants to do the best they can for their family. The career itself doesn't necessarily always support that, right? It's very stressful on the families, but yeah, man, I was just fortunate to have great support both internally and externally, and I didn't have any problems. So probably
Nice.
doesn't answer the question, but yeah,
No, I think
yeah,
it gets to the heart of it is, what that experience was like. And quick story, I've worked with now two former Marines. One was a forward observer in Vietnam, and one was a sniper for Fallujah and Iraqi freedom.
yeah,
And there's something about doing marketing for a combat vet Marine that I have not been able to replicate with any other type of client. Nothing, not saying better or worse, but like certainly unique. How do you feel like your experience with Marines impacted your entry into the more corporate, like business sector?
yeah,
Because that is a unique POV.
yeah, absolutely. Again, I was super fortunate in the Marine Corps to have amazing leaders, and like never had anyone that I worked with or for that just wasn't an awesome human being and Marine and everything else. And so I've got a very skewed picture. I know there's bad experiences or, nuances, but yeah, I think the biggest thing was, what Marine Corps really taught me was what real work ethic is. And, though there's a saying, semper be, semper gumby, which is always flexible. Right. And I think that ability to just be open to to the chaos and accept it and kind of thrive in it allowed me to accomplish more in my career than I would without it, for sure. And I didn't spend a lot of time in the corporate sector, but when I did, it was very apparent that standards of work and effort and just outcomes and accountability aren't always equal, right? And so you know everything that I got from the Marine Corps allowed me to be more successful or have a maybe earlier success because of what I learned compared to maybe some of the people I worked with that maybe just went the university route or something like that. Like it's just, there's I don't know another way to replicate the chaos and stress and kind of just randomness of the military. And then like at 18, 19 years old, young guys and women are thrown into a lot of responsibility and accountability that I just don't think people get outside of that. Right. And so it's a good trial by fire, and again, super, super thankful for it. My two sons both went the military route as well.
Cool.
I think it's a great for a lot of people. It's a great stepping stone to kind of figure yourself out and learn how to become an adult.
Family tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah. One interesting story based on what you described of the transition. I have a very close family friend, Chris Devlin. He's my good buddy's younger brother. And when he was growing up through school, guy was like 6'7" as his high school senior, could run like a 4-minute, 19-second mile, right? And he got last in his graduating class for his GPA. Like he just barely got over the bar through the ASVAB, yeah. Right? It was tough. Like school was not his thing, but athletically he was there. Does 8 years active duty in Marines, goes to college, has a 4.0, graduates top of his class. And he's like, oh, well, after the Marines, this thing was a joke. He's like, no one showed up on time. People were wearing pajamas to class. Meanwhile, he's used to having the uniform. And I thought, if there's a case study of positive benefit of the Marines going from bottom to the top in academics, he would get. So.
Yeah. No, I experienced that same thing, Russ. After I came off active duty and moved back to Northwest Arkansas and finished undergrad and grad school at that time. And yeah, it was just like, hey, I'm just doing the work, right? Like there was, as long as you were willing to show up and put in a little bit of effort, which I didn't have that academic work ethic in high school either, right? And it was like, hey, this is easy. No one's going to yell at you or no one's going to die.
You're not going to get smoked for missing your homework.
Yeah. And so, man, it was just, but again, I think that perspective is something that, a lot of young guys benefit from. And especially with the GI Bill, right? Like there's really not a reason to pursue higher education unless you just have a career path already laid out when you come out of the military, right? And so, man, I think it's great. And yeah, most people I know that came out and said, hey, I'm going to go, further my academic career, they've done extremely well. There's more than a handful of guys I know that were, dumb grunts, for lack of a better word, that have, got, their doctorate from Columbia or Stanford or whatever, right? And it's just because they come out and put in the work.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I can't speak to personally because I'm not, a veteran, but I've got a grandfather who's retired from, I believe, the Air Force or Navy, which he was in both branches. I don't know which one he retired from, but 27 years in. And then when he was done, he went back to this. Well, he had gone back to school during his time GI Bill, but became an entrepreneur shortly thereafter. And I think one of the things that he described would be that it's not the same kind of stress, but I think a commonality with entrepreneurs is you need high stress management, tenacity, grit, follow through, discipline, and really just like a tolerance for pain that you don't get when you're just doing like a corporate job, so to speak,
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah.
I know that it's not the same as, being deployed, but like for the civilian world, I'm assuming it's as close as you can get to an environment. Is that
Yeah.
something that you've experienced as well?
Yeah, I think so. There's some books out, that talk about the comfort level of veterans in chaos, right? And the attraction to entrepreneurship with the risk reward and all that comes with it. But yeah, for me, I came out of the military. It was very, very fortunate and blessed to get uh, a job at the medical university here in Arkansas, where they allowed me the flexibility to get through grad school and all that, like take classes during the day, and they paid for it. So I was able to just pocket the GI Bill money, right, and which was a great dynamic for me. But the little bit of exposure and working in that corporate, like a better term, corporate bureaucratic, and this was nonprofit and government because it's healthcare, state ran school, college, like just all the things that you like the worst pieces of bureaucracy and like corporate nonsense were alive and well in this organization. But fortunately, I had some amazing leaders that kind of bumped that to the best of their ability and showed me how it could work in both, right? And so yeah, I mean, I think that experience let me know that hey, I didn't want to work in a corporate environment, and two, I'm willing to outwork most of my peers, right? Because they're very comfortable just doing the 8 to 5 and like going home and relaxing or whatever. Which like I get very very still to this day get very uncomfortable in like that sort of complacency, static sort of life.
Yeah. Do you think you were always that way, or was that largely learned from the Marines?
Yeah, I think. I mean, there's. I can. My childhood, Ross, was a lot of insecurities and didn't have a purpose, so I pursued pleasure. Right, like that's something you learn as an adult, right? I just thought I was having fun as a kid, but I also just knew I was going to the military, right? So I was just like, hey, do I really need to do school if I'm going to go do this? And so, yeah, I would say I think the work ethic and all that certainly wasn't there, but I can recognize that like my natural tendency is to be like, I can probably do something different or get outside of the status quo and be more comfortable, right?
You're more comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So going through that and your experience and knowing that you didn't want the bureaucratic sort of corporate environment. Now, what are your headlines on LinkedIn are, amateur investor, wannabe podcast host, mediocre business operator. So I don't
Yeah,
think I would not say that you would be a full of hubris or an arrogant person, right? To say this,
yeah,
you've got that, I don't want to say hard on yourself mentality, but
no, no.
potentially. But like those things are pretty different and diverse. Where'd you like? How'd you get started in all the things that you're doing now? Like what?
Yeah, yeah, great question. And so, yeah, came out of the Marine Corps. Was very fortunate to have a great opportunity to pursue education and work. During that time, I met a gentleman that I think he just put on like a little small event. There was maybe four of us in the room talking about entrepreneurship. A guy named Jeff Amorine, who I'm still very connected to this day. But he was a Naval Academy grad that went like Air Force. I think he was like a TACP guy or something. But this was like back in the '80s. But he you know came out of the military and went into entrepreneurship, and like I didn't even know what entrepreneurship was, right? Like a hillbilly from Arkansas. There wasn't a lot of examples around, but I was like, hey, like there's something cool here. Oh, you can actually start your business in Arkansas, and like you don't have to be a tech startup guy, right? Like there's other ways and other paths to entrepreneurship, and so that little bit of exposure helped me, and through that, kind of just that little spark of like, hey, there's maybe another opportunity besides just going the career route in corporate America. Like, here in Northwest Arkansas, like you go to work for Walmart, JB Hunt or Tyson or one of their, adjacent companies, and so it's like, hey, there's another route here. So with that, picked up. I can still remember the first two business books I've read. One was Gary Vaynerchuk's Crush It,
Dude.
and it was like his first book. And then there was another one at the time. Like I got into reading Inc. magazine. I don't know if you remember the Inc. magazine.
Yeah, familiar.
Yeah, there was a guy named, I think it was Norm Brodsky. He wrote a segment in Inc. called Street Smarts, and then he wrote a book called Street Smarts as well. And so like I read those two books, and I was like, man, like this resonates. It's you don't have to be a genius or a tech guy or anything like that to start your own business. So like that's what kicked it off for me. It's like, hey, I'm not gonna go the corporate route. I'm going to do this. So as I was finishing my education and working, I started every bit of my time, energy, and effort was figuring out how to become an entrepreneur and start my own business, and started a number of small companies, mostly in the healthcare space, because that's kind of where my connections were, and had a lot of flame outs. I just didn't know anything, right? I hadn't paid enough dumb tax yet, right? And so, because I was able to work and people had a lot of confidence in me, I was able to raise a little bit of money for different businesses and take a shot at some stuff, and had a couple that hit, had hit some singles and doubles. And through that effort, Ross, I realized I didn't know how to run a business, right? Like I was figured out through my education and really just trial and error how to like start a business, right? And like got really good at that.
How many did you start before you hit that realization?
Five, five.
I love that.
Yeah, 5 or 6 companies. And I was like, man, like I just didn't know how to anything about running a business. Like I could get it going, put the pieces in place, but then like the actual daily execution to make a business work, had no clue on. And so through that, decided like, hey, I need to figure this out. The best path I saw was to get into franchising, and had a guy in my mastermind group that had a franchise in CertaPro Painters, which is out of north of Philadelphia. Man, I'm skipping the name now, but it's a Philadelphia company. So looked at that. It's like, man, painting is real simple. I understand that. I understand business. Maybe I can make a go of it. So we bought a CertaPro painting franchise in Northwest Florida, moved our family down there and started running that. And man, that was like the best learning experience for me of like, here's what really running a business is about. I mean, had to get very practical, lose all the theory and the nonsense, right? And through that time, like to transition into EOS, which I think is part of our conversation here, I still realized, hey, everything I learned in grad school, and my focus in grad school was entrepreneurship. Didn't actually know how to execute anything, and so the franchise model really taught me and forced me to kind of start pulling the levers and learning how to run a business. Through that, and by paying some dumb tax, I was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing, and so I started reading, started looking for answers. Found traction in EOS, and I was like, hey, like at least there's something here, right? And so
you've referenced a phrase that I haven't heard before, but I love that you said dumb tax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the phrases that I love is, if you're going to be dumb, you better be tough.
Okay. Yeah.
When you say that, how would you define like the dumb tax? Because I feel like a lot of people, to be honest, that are listening, that I know that are in a spot where they're maybe over analyzing, or in this place where they might have read every single one of Gary Vaynerchuk's books. Yeah. And Gary would be the first person to be like, hey, I'm not writing this for you to be a student forever. I'm writing this so you take action. But how do you define dumb tax, and how do you get over it?
Yeah. So that's a phrase I stole from an awesome entrepreneur. It's got a cool story out there. I don't know a lot about him personally, but read all of his books. A guy named Keith Cunningham. It's kind of like, if you ever hear him or do any of his kind of seminars, he's kind of like an old, hillbilly kind of country guy, Texas dude, and I came across him, through a Tony Robbins event. But yeah, I think really the dumb tax is like, hey, anything that doesn't work, you need to learn from it, right? And like you're going to pay the dumb tax and say, hey, like this cost me something. It cost me either time, money, or opportunity, right? And those mistakes are going to happen, and you got to accept that. Like, hey, death and taxes are certain. So in paying a dumb tax as an entrepreneur is certain, right? Yeah.
You just stole what I was going to say. The only two certainties in life are death and taxes, and you read my mind there. But if you're afraid of paying taxes or dying, you're less likely to take action that would further your life. So I think when you're an active duty Marine, you kind of have to put that fear of death, and then now as an entrepreneur, that fear of dumb tax to the back seat in order to have the freedom to go forth. Not to interrupt you, but that got me really hyped up. You read my mind.
Yeah.
Speaking of mind reading, you're very active with Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, because the people I know that have gotten involved, and if for those that are listening, Tony Robbins is one of, if not the premier, like mental unlockers for people to dispel limiting beliefs. But like everyone I've talked to said it's been transformative. What's it been like for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly agree with that. And, I've found Tony Robbins, my wife and I did, kind of, on a journey of self-reflection and really trying to understand, again, going back to the purpose versus pleasure, right? And, as we started having some business success and really wasn't getting the fulfillment out of that side of it as much anymore. Right? Early on, like everything was just, hey, it's the business and this is why we're here and all that thing. As that started to transition, and then as our, because we had kids really young, as our kids started to exit the house and establish their own lives, my wife and I really had to go on our journey of like, hey, what's our purpose and kind of vision for ourselves. Long story short, found Tony Robbins. Our first event was actually his Life and Wealth Mastery in Fiji, which highly recommend for anyone looking to do some personal investment in themselves. Like it's awesome. But I think what Tony Robbins has done a really good job, at least for me, was saying, hey, no matter where you're at in your career path, there's always room for personal growth. That growth cannot happen unless you're truly honest and vulnerable and can kind of break down your head trash and your insecurities of what's keeping you from being successful or the things you learned. And, there's a lot, the whole organization does a great job of helping you dive into like why your beliefs and your kind of your decisions and impulses are the way they are, and then changing them to what you want them to be. Right. Like, I think we're all, products of our environment, whether it's family, neighborhoods, whatever, right? Like this has this great influence. But Tony Robbins does a great job of helping you identify those, break them down, and then recreate what you want, right? And I think that's why he's been so successful. Is he does that in a way that's agnostic to where you are on that journey, and just helps you get to where you want to go, right? I don't know if that answers your question or not. But
No, I think so.
yeah,
It's sometimes, going back to the dumb tax quote, like I find that people are more hampered by the beliefs that they hold that are just simply not true than potentially anything else. And it's the scariest, going to an EOS perspective, for like a visionary to have limiting beliefs, because
mm-hmm.
then it cascades down throughout the whole organization. So before we the mental plights of visionaries and integrators and things like that. So you've started several businesses. Now you're investing in yourself. You're looking for more purpose in life. You're looking for probably what seems like the EOS life.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you? It seems like you're an avid, lifelong learner between going back to get your master's, investing in personal development with Tony Robbins. But like, what did the experience with EOS look like? Did you have an implementer when you were a franchise owner?
No, and I wish I would have. Right, and we decided, thought I was smart enough to self implement, and definitely would have had better results had we committed to using an implementer. Just because as I've gone through this EOS journey and really found out what good looks like, I realized all the mistakes we made. Right, and definitely could have mitigated some of those. But for me, Ross, it was, hey, what I'm doing isn't working. Like we're making money, and the business is, on paper is healthy and things like that, but just wasn't really getting fulfillment out of it, right? And wasn't getting, wasn't leaving the EOS life or getting what I wanted out of life, and all those things. And so, um, where EOS helped is it helped me like it provided the framework for clarity of like, hey, this is really why I want to do entrepreneurship and business, right? It wasn't because I wanted to make a ton of money. It wasn't because I, really enjoyed like leading people. Like that wasn't it, right? And really helped me identify my why. And like through that, I also realized, kind of, I think we're transitioning here, but I realized, on paper, I should be a really good integrator, right? That's what I should be. but I don't get like fulfillment, passion out of it, right? At least not anymore. I probably did at one point in my career. And so
Mm-hmm.
like the businesses that we had at that time started to, as I was going through this self-reflection, which I think you've mentioned it earlier in one of our conversations, is like the business is a direct reflection of the mindset and performance and health of the leaders, right? Like that's 100% is. And so I was super unhealthy in a sense. I wasn't happy at work. I wasn't getting fulfillment. And like, I was really just there because I was still making some really good money. And so like, because of that, the businesses were dwindling. People were becoming like the great culture and family and healthy organization that we built was dwindling really, really fast. And it was all because I wasn't providing the clarity and everything I needed to as a visionary because I was so pissed off and unhappy in this integrator seat, right? It's so like
Mm.
long ramble to say like, hey, that like what really EOS did is like it helped me, forced me to say, hey, like you've got to change something. Here's probably where the dynamic is off. And then as I was able to move into really just a visionary, and then now I'm not even really in a visionary state. It's more of just, hey, behind the curtains and all the businesses
Like
that
the
I
owner
still,
box.
yeah, all the business I'm still engaged with. I'm in the owner box, but really just as an implementer, right?
Yeah.
The five companies that I own, the majority of or all of, I only meet with in that capacity as an implementer, right? And
So you were an implementer for the businesses that you own.
yeah, and like that's really where I'm happy, right? And so long transition and ramble to talk about how I got into EOS. As I started selling these businesses, I was like, hey, it's just not happy no matter what money we're making. This isn't the path, and the businesses are going to go, you know, continue to dive if I stay in this dynamic. Through that, it's like, hey, like where do I want to be? Found out that being an EOS implementer was an actual thing, right? And I was like, man, that seems really cool. Really love EOS. Started reaching out to some of the folks on the corporate level, and like everyone was just awesome. And I'm sure other people have talked about it, but like, when you find your tribe and like-minded people, like you're there. And so, man, everyone in the EOS community really wants to help first. We all think the same. We believe very strongly about what EOS is and what it isn't. And like now, I get to spend my time working with clients doing EOS and with the businesses I own. So I still get to scratch that entrepreneur itch. I only work in the environment where I'm happy and can add the most value as an implementer. And like, so it's been great. Yeah. So very, very fortunate to kind of get where I am, but I think I sidetracked this from your original question. So I'm sorry.
No, I think one of the things you mentioned that's super interesting tie back is specifically the veteran entrepreneurs I've talked to have described their experience outside of the military as sort of lonely and isolating because there's just not that many people to connect with. I think if you don't have a tribe of like-minded individuals with core values, that does spill over to the visionary integrator, where if they're just not, I think the community and tribe aspect is underlooked and undervalued sometimes in terms of business ownership. So what is one of the ways that finding this EOS tribe, so to speak, has positively impacted your mindset, your performance, and spilled over into your companies you own? Like now that you feel like you've got a corporate, not a corporate tribe, but like a different tribe than when you're in the
Yeah.
military.
Yeah. I mean, definitely having a peer group is important. And I got that through the other franchises as well for the most part. Like, we have, peer groups in the franchise community where you're meeting regularly with other franchisees. And so like that helps a lot. And anyone that owns a business, whether in a franchise or not, I highly encourage you to get like a peer group that you have structured, vulnerable conversations with on a regular basis outside of your team, because it can be lonely. Even with leadership teams, it can be lonely as a leader, right? And so yeah, for me, I think what EOS is and going down this implementer route is forced me to focus on like, hey, we do L10 meetings as a family now, or for the most part it's just my wife and I, right? But like we've got to practice what we preach, focus on, hey, let's focus on quality of life and who we want to be as people first, and then let's figure out how the businesses can support that, right? Versus before, and I'm sure a lot of people are guilty of this, you get so tied up into the business and like your I guess your identity and like your measurement of a man or a woman, and like your success is determined by the performance of the business versus, and like that's a scary roller coaster to be on, and I've been on it, right? And like because it's something goes wrong, man, like that roller coaster, if the business is down and you're riding that way or riding the train with it, then like that's going to impact you from a family standpoint, health standpoint, things like that, right? And so it's better. And I can't think of the quote right now. I think there's a Hunter S. Thompson quote, but it talks about the identify the quality of life and build your quality of life, and then figure out how to make money or business to support that, right? And like that's, I think, all long answer to say that's really what EOS helped me do is like, hey, here's the true quality of life I want. Where's my purpose and passion is as a human being, and then hey, now everything else you're doing over here has got to go to support that, right? And so for me, that is helping people and helping businesses. And like I love every time I get, here in a couple of hours, I'm going to go do a EOS workshop for about 10 different companies. I'm like, that's like the highlight of my week, right? Like I absolutely love that. And I still get to scratch my entrepreneurship itch and make the money I need to make and all that by being an implementer for my own companies, and so.
Never had someone bring up Hunter S. Thompson in the same topic of EOS libraries. But as someone who's a gonzo journalism fanatic, especially back in my earlier days of reading it all, I guess what I want to ask about that point is what is like a concept from Hunter S. Thompson that every visionary, speaking specifically to visionaries, could take into and benefit from? Like, what's a tip? Because I don't think integrators would get all that much value from Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail. But
well, man, we probably need to have that conversation over happy hour or something, Ross. But I think the biggest thing is like understanding this maybe isn't Hunter S. Thompson in general, but like where my thoughts are at this point in my journey is like, we get so tied up in like our ego and like self-importance and things like that when we're running a business, right? Like, because we're the guy, right? And like it's so we're so insignificant in the scheme of things, you know what I mean? Like businesses aren't, at least my businesses aren't changing the world, right? Like I'm a small business guy, and like, I'm not putting people on Mars or whatever, but like, man, it's just I think for me, and this isn't, again, this probably doesn't answer your question directly, I think it's enjoy life, be good to people, help people when you can, and like just enjoy that journey. I think that's where I focus on it. And even in EOS a little bit, we get so focused on like where we're going, right, that we forget like, hey, it's great, and like EOS is the best thing I've found in life to like, if you have a clear vision, like create a clear vision, and here's the tools to get there, right? Like,
yes,
personally, professionally, I think EOS is a great system to get there. What we also have to remember is like, even if we don't get there, man, life happens along the way, right? And so like, you've got to be happy every day, and you've got to add value every day, and like just be a good person along that journey, and like enjoy all the shit that comes with it. And then if you end up getting there, then that's cool too. But at least what I found is
it's really about the journey. The significance is in whether they're seemingly insignificant daily things. Mm-hmm. But like stopping to smell the roses and be appreciative, because one of the authors that I believe was predecessor to Hunter S. Thompson, same line of thought, William Blake out of Britain, this was in the Romantic period, has a quote that probably also is why the Doors are called the Doors. It's that if the I'm going to butcher it, but hear me out. If the window of perception were cleaned, everything would appear as it is, which is infinite. Which is like, it really is, if your perception is clear, like life's infinite. Like anything is possible.
I like that one. Yeah, man, it really is. But yeah, I mean, that's, the reason that it's not clear is because of all the head trash and insecurities that we get, through our life, particularly as a kid and stuff like that. Right. So, yeah. Sorry. I think I totally derailed our conversation here.
I think I'm appreciating the ride, brother. Like, this is where the conversation's supposed to go if we're just flowing. I think you're right in the right seat with this. Yeah. Speaking of conversations and derailing, I want to talk about, we talked a lot about your military, your upbringing, your business interests and EOS, but one thing we didn't talk about is something that you talk about, podcasting. You've done 70 plus episodes. You've had, a couple podcasts. Can you talk to me about how you got into that and what it's been like?
Yeah. So I think part of that, is not taking myself too seriously, right? Or else, so because I'm a follower of Gary Vaynerchuk, right? Like I go to, well, at least I did when they were having. I go to the VCon conferences and stuff, which are great times. But it's really just about putting yourself out there and figuring out like what's working and not. And for me on the podcast piece, the two things I've tried to accomplish with that is one, like it's a great networking tool, right? So I'm really active on LinkedIn, and what I've found is like reaching out to people and saying, hey, love to hear more about your business and just talk, right? Like you get some responses, but if you're like, hey, you want to jump on a podcast? We were like, oh yeah, sure. You know what I mean? Love to do that. Right. And so like, for me, it's just been a way to have really cool conversations with some awesome people. And we've, through the different versions, we had a franchise one, and now we're doing this one called Businesses Effing Hard, which I'm happy to share why we're doing that. But
I do want to hear why you're doing that, because I love the name.
Yeah. But it's just, man, we're just so fortunate to meet some awesome people from all over the world, and relationships that we wouldn't have otherwise. And some of the earliest guests, I still talk to them randomly, or like, help make some business connections and stuff. And so like, for me, it's just a great way to meet awesome people, talk about cool stuff, and maybe we get some content we can use at one point and somewhere along the business lines. Right. But yeah, so the Business is Effing Hard podcast, and I've got a great team of folks that are like integrators in the different businesses I own that are doing most of the heavy lifting on that. But one of the things that I haven't seen a lot of, and I read and listen to podcasts and stuff just religiously, is people talking about what's hard about entrepreneurship, right? Like, or just business in general. Like everyone can get on and talk about how awesome they are and like how much they're kicking ass and
they're saving the world with their franchise business of home services, which may not be accurate.
Yeah, just amazing stuff, right? Which is cool, and like you got to have that confidence in what you're doing, right, to be good at it. But where I think there's an opportunity, and we haven't figured out how to do this the right way yet, is like have a medium where people can talk about like, hey, like, and the question we ask is like, hey, what's kicking your ass right now? It's like, because that is constant, right? At least for me, and dumb Arkansas hillbilly, and maybe I make more mistakes than most people, but like for me, it's just a constant like, hey, there's a new problem to solve, new issue. And like that can be stressful, and mentally, physically, emotionally, all those things. And it's like, let's have a real conversation about that, right? And then like, how do we get to that? How we accomplish that? So that's what we're trying to do. Haven't figured it out yet. I think we're 30 episodes in. Had some amazing people on, but we've probably take some cues from you on how to be better podcasters. But that's the ultimate end goal. I don't know that we'll ever do more than just have some really, really cool conversations, but we've committed to get to 100 episodes, and we'll see where it goes, man.
You're at 30 plus right now?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the statistic that 90% of all podcasts have less than 3 episodes, and that 90% of the remaining podcasts in the pool have less than 21 episodes?
Really?
So not again, I want to take a page out of your book, which is saying like mediocre podcaster. Yeah. Well, in terms of being in the 1% of existing podcasts, we could say we're both mediocre within the 1%, which is an accurate reflection.
Yeah.
Shit's kind of hard.
It's real hard, man.
But I love that you're talking about it, because when you shine light on it, right? Like same with IDS, first step in solving an issue is to identify it. Right. And then what you're doing on the podcast is you're discussing it. And then whether or not you come to a solve, you can decide whether you deal with it, you forget about it, or, it's not an issue, right?
Yeah.
But you don't get there without doing the podcast, in my, shameless plug for yours, or actually IDSing, like following the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to touch base, man. It's just so I'm going to break the fourth wall to the audience. What Calvin just said is the main benefit or purpose for his podcast is probably exactly aligned with this show. I reached out to Calvin, probably on LinkedIn, wanted to have a conversation, thought we'd have some good content for you. And it was the same thing. I was literally just like, I want to talk, share stories with interesting people, that if I was just like, hey, you want to talk on a Zoom call, not recorded, without any audience, probably like, don't have time. But as soon as we talk about like making content that could be beneficial to you guys, maybe there's some benefit to our audiences respectively, or our business, great, that's secondary. But really, selfishly, I just like having these kinds of conversations with people like Calvin. So it's great to hear you feel the same way.
Yeah,
But
man.
with that, I want to talk about the Gary Vaynerchuk thing because it's really heavy on my mind in a good
Yeah.
way. So you were at his actual conferences. I saw him at a conference called Inbound, thrown by HubSpot. He was a keynote speaker in 2016, and it was the day after the day before the election. And he goes, "Hey, I don't give a shit who is the president. I'm still going to go out there and outperform all of you. And if you guys are worried about the election results, then you've already lost."
Yeah.
And then the next day, the next speaker, he left and did his thing. And I'm like, wow, that's such an interesting perspective. There were people crying because Trump won. Oh my God, the world's gonna end. And it's like, did you not listen to Gary's message?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to cry. Like, just deal with it.
Yeah, you gotta. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Ross, and I think because of the influences I have, like Gary Vaynerchuk and others, is like I'm fully aware that I'm too insignificant to like where a presidential election is going to personally impact my life. Without to say, like I fully am aware of the chaos and stress and things that are happening, especially we all have some sort of one degrees of connection to people that are
Yes.
impacted in some way, right?
Yes.
But I think this is part of my journey right now is like, hey, like if if I'm stressed about something or something's concerning me or heavy on my heart or like just isn't where I want it to be, either I've got to go do something about it and actually put my money where my mouth is, which is a lot of people don't do, right? Like we say, like, hey, this bothers me. Oh, this sucks. Oh, the president sucks. Whatever. But it's like, okay, are you going to do something, or are you just going to
Complain.
wallow in your own and complain, right? And so, like, you know, I think the reality of maybe what Gary Vaynerchuk is saying is like, hey, unless you're going to go do something about it, focus on what you're actually spending time on and your energy, and then like worry about that shit, right? Like, because if you're not going to do
Yeah.
anything, then like you shouldn't even be stressed about it. Like, and I think there's a famous Instagram or clip going around with like I think it's Bezos is on there. He's like, hey, stress comes from lack of action, right? And so like once you start taking that action, the stress and stuff goes away. And so like when I get into that pity party and like I'm I've done it recently with a number of things of like feeling sorry for myself or the world's falling apart. It's like, okay, am I going to focus on that and actually take action and do something to solve it? Or do I need to realize that, hey, I'm not going to do that and, focus on what I am going to spend my time on. And yeah. So
Well,
that's my thoughts on that.
another reason why I said it was heavy on my mind is people make fun of me when I say that one of my favorite activities is to mow the lawn and like do lawn work. And they're like, why would you say that? It's because I work behind the computer screen quite a bit. You get to go out there, see the result of some manual work and be proud of it immediately.
Yeah.
Not what we do as owners, investors, but
Yeah.
I listen to podcasts, right? Like you read books, listen to podcasts while I'm mowing the lawn. I'm listening to Day Trading Attention, which is Gary's recent book from
great one.
less than a year ago.
Yeah.
And dude, when I tell you this, that like I'm mowing the lawn and I'm like nodding my head with goosebumps, people might think I'm crazy, but I'm like, no, Gary, like this is this is the reason why back then, 20 years ago, when you started Wine Library, people thought you were nuts and you bet on yourself and you didn't give a crap about other people's opinions, and you saw it through, and that's why you are where you are. And I'm just like, it's not even that I think it's inspirational, motivational. It's like a reality check through my earbuds that people with those types of mindsets that bet on themselves with relentless action and pursuit of just love of the game, right? Like, he just loves to fucking win. He doesn't have to work.
Yeah.
His grandkids don't have to work.
Yeah.
But he does because it's his DNA. Like, if he doesn't, then he's not him anymore, and then he's probably going to go nuts. Like, that guy, if he's not doing his best every single day, probably as unhappy could be. So, like, people like that are wired like you, same thing. Idle hands are devil's tools. If you're not doing something, you're probably miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what we all got to pursue too, right? Is if we can wake up every day and get to do what we want, and what's the EOS piece of this? It's do what you love with people you love, get compensated appropriately, and have time for other passions, right?
You got it,
dude. Like that's it. That's all we need, right? Everything else is just noise.
Amen. So this has been a lot of fun going down, telling stories, really off script, but I like doing these kind of conversations as opposed to just like an interrogation, so to speak. But there's questions that I asked before and you say, ask me later. And I'm probably not even going to, because, the only one I would say is, and this is an interesting one. If you could convert, I usually ask it like, hey, if you could have a conversation with either your 80-year-old self or your 8-year-old self, what would you say?
Mm-hmm.
My question is a little bit different because you've had children, when you're 18. I'm assuming you're not in your 50s. You're probably in your early 40s, late 30s is my guess.
Yeah. In the 40s, yeah.
Okay. I was going to say 39, but hey,
Yeah.
maybe 39 and a half. But my question is for you, like, how would you talk to your grandson when they're in the formative years, say like 8, 9, 10, like starting to, come to consciousness, like can read, grandson or daughter, it doesn't matter, differently than how your relationship with your grandparents would have been with your son, or your grandparents were with you,
Yeah.
your parents. Like, what generational beliefs would you want to implant in the future generation that were not the beliefs that were implanted into you?
Yeah. I
Going
mean,
back to Tony Robbins.
yeah. I mean, I think a big part of it is, one, I had amazing parents and grandparents, like, and I think that's maybe why I relate to Gary Vee so much, is like, unbridled confidence and stuff was sort of, you know, embedded in me early age. I think there's a quote from, I think it's the movie Blow, right? We're talking Hunter
Okay.
Thompson, Johnny Depp. No,
Yeah.
not the movie Blow, right? But I think the guy, Johnny Depp's character on there says, is like, "Hey, my ambition will always outperform my talents," right? So, like, for me, that was embedded early on. I think where I would do it differently than even what I did with my kids. I think the one thing that I would change, and this is a negative belief. I don't say negative, but just my family was very military or corporate, or worked a job and like did the same thing, like took care of your family, but like there wasn't a big pursuit for like a lot more, right? Like there were very happy people, but very content in the sense of like, hey, you can. It doesn't matter where you start or what you're doing. You can do anything in the world, and it doesn't have to be make a lot of money. It doesn't have to be, it just you just have to enjoy doing it. So I think even for my kids, what I would do differently now that I've learned a little bit and I'm just more mature and paid the dumb tax, is like, hey, like, it doesn't matter if you're doing good in school. It doesn't matter if you're going to be a doctor or the president or whatever. Like, man, if you can just wake up every day and do something awesome that like adds some value, and like you're a good person, like just do that, right? And then you can figure out how to make money doing anything else. And so, probably not a good direct answer, Ross, but like I would just, when I'm fortunate enough to start spending time with my grandkids, hopefully I'll just tell them like, hey, like just go be awesome, have fun, and like all the crap that that people worry about it's just crap. Like, it's not.
Like, you're a window cleaning franchise for your future generations. You're gonna keep that window perception clean as possible and say, hey, life's infinite. Go out and do it.
Yeah.
Kinda. That's what I heard.
Yeah, man. And I'm yeah. So I'm trying to instill that with my kids now, like after the fact, because I was very, hey, you got to be disciplined, you got to work hard in school and all that, and like at the end of the day, man, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. The only thou shalt commandment is be as good of a person as you can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it,
The
man.
one that matters. All right. This is the secret of the podcast. We're approaching the time, and I'm stoked to drop this because you thrive in surprises and chaos.
Sure.
I'm going to frame it with, it's leave a question, ask a question. So the last guest didn't know who you were. Feels like he did after reading his question and share with you. And he has a question for you. And then after you answer that, think of a question you'd like for me to ask the next guest.
Sure.
So this is hilarious, Calvin. I'm going to do my best with a poker face.
Okay.
What are the things that are holding you back that may be only in your mind and not actual barriers? Holy crap. After talking about your limiting belief talk with Tony Robbins and all the work you've done on exactly that question,
Yeah.
it's crazy to me that was asked for you.
Yeah, still working through a lot of that, Ross. It's a great
Yeah.
question. It's something I think we all got to revisit on a lot. I think the biggest thing for me right now that I'm two things. One is, is what I'm doing and spending my time on, does it really matter? Like, am I making a positive impact to somebody in the world, right? Like, I'm still like the purpose piece is still something I'm figuring out like this point of my journey and like what that really is like. And so I think I've got to define that better. And then the other piece, and I've had conversations about this recently with some of my peers, is like, you know, I've been a fanatic about being confident in marketing and selling the businesses I'm a part of or connecting people. And like, I'm involved with a nonprofit organization here called Startup Junkie, where we do like free coaching and advice for startup businesses. And like, I thrive in that. Now that I'm half like asking people to pay me to be an implementer, right? Like I struggle with that a little bit, like of
Really?
like, hey, should I be charging people with this? And am I good enough to charge people for this? Right. Like that's, still something I struggle with like pretty consistently. And so those are the two things like, hey, am I focused on the right purpose? And, you know, I love EOS and I love everything about it. I love being in the session room, but I'm like, I've got to get more confident in like saying, hey, this really works and you really should pay me for it. So like that's probably the easiest way to answer the question. And I spend a lot of time on that reflection. So I appreciate the question. As far as the next question goes, I'm assuming you're going to talk to another implementer.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
I'm not going to tell you either way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was a good question. I think that where a lot of my time and energy right now and where I spend a lot of time coaching and talking to people on is like, is really around the why. And so I don't know the right way to frame the question, but it's, is your focus, time, energy, and effort, everything that you're pursuing right now, like why is that? Like, is it really going to make you happy, or are you doing it because that's a journey that you started and you feel obligated to kind of continue on, right? So like, I don't know. I'm sure you can paraphrase better than I can, Ross. But like, that would be the question I ask a lot of people now. Is like, whether it's your business, profession, whatever. Like, if you want to be $100 million company, why? And like, what does that really mean? And like, why is that the go? Or, hey, if you want to be, have 1,000 podcast episodes, why? That's just how I'm challenging people right now to really kind of understand more. Is like, are you doing this because it really makes sense? It's going to make you happy, and it's like, why? What you're on earth to do, or are you doing it because like you think you need to make some money, or it's the cool thing, or whatever, right?
It's not what is your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal. It's why is
Mm-hmm.
that your
Yeah,
BHAG?
yeah, that's a better way to ask it. See, I knew you could paraphrase it.
Hey, look, I'm just listening, doing
Yeah,
my best to listen with 2 ears, and man,
yeah,
I'm gonna be probably thinking about that in my next clarity break. Like, why is this my goal? Right?
yeah,
It's great to have them, but if you don't have justification for it, then how great is it?
yeah, yeah. It's good to
Well,
good to reflect, man. Ross, it's been awesome. Thanks for having me.
thank you for being on a guest. I had a blast. This is the stuff that gets me fired up. I could do this if I did this every workday, the same kind of level of conversation. I don't know. I can answer why my BHI goal would be what it is or what it is, but I know that when you're focusing on smelling the roses and having fun doing what you're doing, this would be an example of that. So thank you to Calvin and everyone listening. Thank you for listening. I hope that we've met your expectation of delivering some brainstorms and stories to help improve your life, liberty, and pursuit of property as the founding fathers would want. And if so, and if made, promised, delivered, I have an ask for you, and that's share this content with somebody else because I don't plan to run ads in the show. And the only way it grows is through you sharing it. Thank you, Calvin. And thank you, everyone listening. My only ask now is to be well.
Thanks, Ross.